cita-cita kita lawan.
Di negara ini ditegakkan.
COVID-19 tidak hanya membawa dampak negatif untuk kesehatan, namun juga untuk keberlangsungan pekerjaan dan penghasilan para buruh. International Labour Organization memberikan prediksi bahwa secara global pandemi ini akan menyebabkan sekitar 195 juta orang kehilangan pekerjaan. International Labour Organization juga memprediksi 4 dari 5 pekerja merasakan dampak dari berhentinya operasi perusahaan atau pengurangan jam kerja. Data Kementerian Tenaga Kerja Indonesia pada April 2020 mengungkapkan bahwa sekitar 2 juta pekerja formal dan informal terkena PHK akibat pandemi ini. Jumlah ini berpotensi akan terus meningkat dengan perkembangan penyebaran COVID-19 yang masih mengkhawatirkan. Akomodasi, jasa makanan, manufaktur, dan retail adalah sektor-sektor yang paling merasakan dampak negatif kelesuan usaha akibat COVID-19. Krisis global akibat pandemi COVID-19 membawa komplikasi yang belum pernah terjadi sebelumnya bagi Indonesia untuk mencapai tujuan pembangunannya. Pemerintah menyadari dampak signifikan COVID-19 terhadap mata pencarian banyak orang terhadap berbagai sektor di seluruh Indonesia. Oleh karena itu, dukungan bagi sektor terdampak ini menjadi pondasi yang diperlukan oleh pemerintah dalam bertindak lebih lanjut untuk memastikan adanya pemulihan jangka panjang masyarakat dan ekonomi Indonesia.
Ya, sudah lebih dari 1 tahun Indonesia menghadapi pandemi COVID-19 dan tentu saja pandemi ini telah memberikan dampak yang sangat negatif baik terhadap kesehatan kita tapi juga terhadap perekonomian. Bukan saja perekonomian di Indonesia tapi perekonomian di seluruh dunia. Banyak sekali yang merasakan dampaknya, kehilangan pekerjaan dan tentu saja memiliki berbagai macam ragam masalah yang berkaitan dengan COVID-19. Nah, untuk tahun ini Indonesia mendapatkan pinjaman sebesar 500 US dollars atau sekitar 7 triliun rupiah dari Bank Dunia yang diharapkan akan bisa membantu ya memperkuat perekonomian maupun penggunaan fiskal di Indonesia ini. Dan tentu saja Indonesia dan Bank Dunia sudah menjadi mitra yang cukup lama. Dan untuk apa saja pinjaman ini akan digunakan dan juga apa kira-kira strategi dari partnership antara Indonesia dan Bank Dunia ke depan, ya. Saya sudah berada di kantor Bank Dunia di Jakarta dengan Country Director Bank Dunia yang sudah lebih dari 1 tahun di sini, Satu Kahkonen. Halo, Bu Satu, apa kabar? How are you?
Very good, baik.
Bu Satu, ya, Satu, as you probably know in Indonesia means number one, and you are the number one person of the World Bank. And there's a very interesting story here because we are now conducting, kita melakukan wawancara ini di gedung Bank Dunia di BEJ, tetapi ini untuk hampir lebih dari 1 tahun, ya, lebih dari 1 tahun Bu Satu berada di kantor. So tell us a little bit because you came in February 2020, in March COVID-19 entered Indonesia, and then it's all about lockdown, it's all about social distancing, wearing masks and working from home. And how has it been for you? By the way, we've both been vaccinated, jadi kita cukup aman lah, sudah PCR ya. So tell us a little bit about your first year experience in Indonesia. It must be quite a shock to you.
It has already been a year and a half. I moved to Indonesia in mid-February 2020. As I started this assignment, and I moved here from Ukraine. Okay. So from the middle of the winter, from the middle of snow and ice, and I was very excited. I mean, Indonesia, we have one of our largest programs, as you know, in Indonesia, one of the biggest offices. So I was ready for the challenge. But I would have never guessed that in about a month we are going to be in home-based work. So the past year and a half, we have been working from home. It's been quite a different start than what I hoped for. I have met most people then via video.
It's all via Zoom these days. But you've managed to, basically your partner, you know, the Indonesian government obviously, but you've managed your sort of meeting with them and, you know, actually discuss strategies, and, you know, it hasn't really impacted the quality of the cooperation, so to speak?
I hope it has not impacted the quality of the cooperation. I have to say that I have been very pleased how everybody has welcomed me, how everybody has welcomed the team, and we have done a lot. In fact, when I now look back, I'm amazed how much we have managed to do, and I can only imagine how much we could have done had it been business as usual. Perhaps less, perhaps more.
Yeah, give us some examples of the kind of things that you've been doing for the past year and a half. Obviously, this is a time when you know, it's a big shock, it's a big disruption to all of us, and particularly to Indonesia's budget. You know, the government has allocated quite a big chunk of its annual budget to deal with the pandemic and to deal with the job losses and everything. So tell us a little bit about what sort of necessary adjustments that has been made in the last year and a half.
Yeah. Now, obviously, the crisis has meant that we very quickly had to step up our engagement, and we had to step up our support for Indonesia. And that's what we have done, because the government has had extraordinarily high financing needs. So we stepped our financial support, and we also stepped up our monitoring and analytical support. So what we did as the crisis started, we in fact prepared very quickly a large emergency support package for the government. And that package was supporting then the expansion and strengthening of social assistance to the people in need. It was supporting the strengthening of healthcare system to cope with the delivery of the pandemic. And it also provided broader support for government's emergency program. We also very quickly had to adjust a lot of our ongoing operations to respond to the crisis. And what we are doing now is that we are supporting the government with vaccine deployment. So that's on the financial side. But then on the monitoring side, we established also very quickly a monitoring system to assess the impact on households and firms. And we did that through surveys. So how people are impacted, which groups are impacted, how do they cope, and what should be done. And this was supplementing government's own monitoring systems. And it in fact ended up informing government's policy response. And for us, it told us what is working and what is not. So this is very much what we have been doing in the past year and a half, in addition to a lot of other things.
Yes, I'm sure it's, at the moment, these are the kinds of help that the government needs and the people need. Let's go back to the package, the financial package. Maybe you can go a little bit more into exactly the amount, especially for last year, and also whether this year also there is, the same amount, or is it increasing? And then how, in terms of the monitoring, what are your views about how the money and the funding is being used? Tell us a little bit more.
Right. So first of all, about the emergency package, it amounted to about $1 billion US. And we also then got some other development partners join us, so that the amount got actually increased even beyond that. And that was on top of what we had already done in 2020. So we finished that year amounting about $2 billion US in terms of assistance to Indonesia. Now this year, this fiscal year, we have already provided $2.2 billion US in terms of financial support to Indonesia. And we are planning to increase. So we are planning to go to about $2.5 billion annually, because again, we see the needs in the country.
So there is actually an increase because of COVID-19. I mean, this is far above than what you would have allocated for Indonesia otherwise if the pandemic didn't happen.
That's correct. It's about the levels it would have been otherwise. In the previous years, the World Bank has lent between 1 billion and 1.5 billion US dollars. So this was a step up, and we plan to now keep the higher level because we see also that the economic recovery, or during the economic recovery period, the government will need continued support.
And is this something that both you, the World Bank and the government, sit down together and say what we need the money for and how will it be used? I mean, what would you like to see, and what is the government, have they been actually using it for the purpose that it's meant to be?
Yes. No, absolutely. This was agreed together with the government. We are never developing our strategies and our plans in isolation. It's done in consultations. And the new country engagement strategy that we also managed to prepare in the past 12 months, in fact, we had broader consultations than we have ever had in Indonesia. And everything was done online. But indeed, I mean, what we are doing, what is in our plans, it is very much reflecting what the government and what the other stakeholders have asked us to do.
So which are mainly what? We're talking about emergency. Obviously the Indonesian government itself has set aside for things like, you know, the direct, you know, the cash transfers, and then also to basically help, you know, those who are recently unemployed. They get their training and they also get their pocket money and you know, all sorts of not just health but economic and financial help as well. Now, what would this emergency funding be mainly used for, do you think?
The emergency funding, bulk of it was actually going to the expansion of social assistance, PKH.
Yeah.
So expanding that, plus also there were already plans, luckily as the pandemic started, plans for the strengthening of the PKH system. So that's where about 400 million US dollars went in quick go. And then the rest went to support the healthcare delivery and then the emergency program that the government had put together. But if you want to hear overall, you know, where we are going and what our strategy is supporting, I'm also happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because we have zero tolerance for corruption. But we want to make sure that it is going for the purposes that is meant to. So health, absolutely. Yeah. Social assistance, the same. That the money that we have dispersed is indeed going for the intended purposes. That is not yet fully dispersed.
So, but for 2020, at least you're quite happy to see the money, the funds being used properly, and has it been sort of well absorbed, so to speak? Because this is always a problem in Indonesia. It's not just the money, but whether it's actually spent and spent where it's supposed to go.
Yes. No, we are actually very happy how the money was spent. First of all, in the case of health, the healthcare, the emergency operation that we developed, it is already fully dispersed. So in 1 year, all the money has been used, and it has been used the way it was intended. As you know, I mean, World Bank has quite rigorous systems in place. Yeah. To make sure that the money...
And it should.
Yes, and it should, absolutely, because we have zero tolerance for corruption. But we want to make sure that it is going for the purposes that is meant to. So health, absolutely. Yeah. Social assistance, the same. That the money that we have dispersed is indeed going for the intended purposes. That is not yet fully dispersed. Because as you know, government was basically allocating significant additional money for social assistance. Now, one thing I do want to mention, the monitoring that we did, in fact, did indicate that in the first 6 months, the social assistance implementation was somewhat delayed, and the money was not absorbed as intended. And that's where I think the monitoring that we did became very handy, because it helped them to start identifying where the bottlenecks
absolutely.
are.
And it's always a bit of a moral hazard, you know, where there is cash, you know, and it's anyway, Indonesia, as you know, we're very much a democratic country. We're also quite decentralized. There's a lot of monitoring to do, particularly on the regional and the local level. Now, going back to the strategy, because I mean, Indonesia and the World Bank, we've been partners for a long time. And of course, I see that over the years, that the relationship sort of changed and evolved, and I see there's more sort of a partnership now. For 2021 and 24, there is a new framework. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit. So what can we expect in the next 3 or 4 years in the strategy of the partnership between the bank and the country?
That's a very good question. So as you know, every 5 years we develop a new engagement strategy in every country where we are operating. And we did that in the past 12 months in Indonesia, took it to our board. In May, it was very well received. So what we are focusing on, we are currently focusing on supporting Indonesia's economic recovery from the crisis. And we were very clear also in our engagement strategy that the first 2-3 years we are going to focus on that, because this crisis is prolonged, it's widespread, and it's going to take time to get past that. But we can never focus only on the short term. So the strategy is also having a line of sight for the promotion of longer term economic development and economic growth. So that is where we are aiming for. So we have identified 4 engagement areas that we are focusing on. The first one is focusing on trying to make strengthen Indonesia's ability to compete in international markets by
increase competitiveness.
Increase competitiveness, indeed. And we are doing that then by supporting reforms in investment, trade, fiscal and financial sector. So that's one big area we focus on. The second area is focusing then on expansion and greening of infrastructure, in particular energy. So we are very excited about the energy sector transition that the government has announced, and we are very keen to support that. Then the third area where we are going to focus is very much focusing on human development. And this is the key area because of the crisis.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we've seen, Indonesia's, we've been doing quite well in terms of eradicating some of our poverty, but now it's, of course.
Unfortunately, some of the earlier gains are now in jeopardy. But there we are strengthening healthcare, as I already discussed briefly. We are focusing on education, social protection, obviously, and then prevention of malnutrition. So the government has already a very big stunting program, and we will continue supporting that.
So this is going to be part of it's streamlined, obviously, with Indonesia's growth program. You know, we have a medium-term and a long-term program. So everything will be streamlined as part of that.
Everything is, what we do is very much consistent with the government's medium-term development strategy. So that's actually the starting point where we start. We look at what the government is planning to do, then we look at our own comparative advantage, where we are good at. I don't think we are good in everything. And then we also, we do analysis that what are the biggest development needs? What needs to be done to reduce poverty and accelerate or improve living standards of ordinary people? And then it's three buckets, government strategy, our comparative advantage, and then what we have identified the biggest needs. And it's basically the overlapping area where we focus. And if I may mention the fourth area, is basically natural resource management. So basically strengthening the management, it's both the blue economy and green economy. So oceans, mangroves, peatlands, forests, and also enhancing disaster resilience of Indonesia. And it's already very clear that this is not the V-shaped recovery. Now, Indonesia has been less affected than many other countries. So the recession in Indonesia has been milder because the world economy shrank by 3.5% in 2020. Indonesia's economy shrank only by 2.1%.
And you've been talking to, presumably, the Minister of Finance on this, on these numbers.
Absolutely, absolutely. And she is very keen to have this pooling fund also established.
Now, and the other thing, of course, is, and it's not just in Indonesia, it's all over the world, but particularly in Indonesia, because we have been posting quite healthy growth before COVID, you know, sort of above 5%. And I think the government was hoping that this year we would sort of have like the V-shaped kind of rebound from COVID, you know, where we can get at least, you know, a good positive number. But what are your thoughts about the growth for the next 1 or 2 years in Indonesia, Satu? I mean, are we...
You know, Budesa, I mean, we were all hoping that there would be a V-shaped recovery. I remember when we all, you know, the lockdown started in March, we were all hoping that, oh, we are going to be back in the office in September.
And once everybody's vaccinated, and now even with vaccination, we've got increasing numbers of cases, right?
Exactly, exactly. And it's already very clear that this is not the V-shaped recovery. Now, Indonesia has been less affected than many other countries. So the recession in Indonesia has been milder because the world economy shrank by 3.5% in 2020. Indonesia's economy shrank only by 2.1%.
Well, which is unheard of in Indonesia, though.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. It was the first recession since the Asian financial crisis. But we don't expect V-shaped recovery. We do expect that Indonesia's economy is going to grow by about 4.4% in 2021. But this is predicated on basically the pandemic getting under control. And obviously this latest wave of infections is a concern. Because every time a new wave comes and there will be restrictions, the economy will slow down. And therefore, let's see what happens in the second half of this calendar year. But 4.4 at this point already looks, you know, somewhat optimistic.
Very optimistic. I think we'd be happy to get anywhere near 4 at this rate. Now, of course, one of the main impacts of this pandemic is a lot of people, you know, have lost their jobs, or people who have got their jobs find that their income's reduced, and obviously poverty and poverty alleviation is one of the sort of key point why the World Bank is with us, partnering with us to help us improve the social welfare for the people, improve the country's economy. Now, how do you see, who's greatly impacted? Obviously, Indonesia, we have a lot of small, medium enterprises. Actually, more than 60% of our economies is basically on the small scale. We have a lot of informal workers, and also with everything going down, demands going down, and people falling into poverty. How do you see it? Because this covers not just the socio-economic things, but this is also a gender thing, especially. You know, I see that women in households and even the work from home and everything from home is women often get the brunt of this as well, right? Maybe you could talk us into how your perspective.
Yeah, let me tell you a little bit, because obviously the big concern is that the poverty has increased, and it has not increased as much as it could have, because we also did the scenarios, what happens without any government support and what happens with the government support. So basically the government's emergency program has cushioned quite significantly the people. No, I'm not saying that it has cushioned everybody, because there is still an increase in the poverty rate. Yeah. But it's not as big as it could have been had the government not implemented its support. Now, who are then the people who are hit? Unfortunately, and this is true in this crisis throughout the globe, that it is particularly women who are hard hit, much harder than men. Because it is the sectors, retail, hospitality, and garment that have been affected. And these are areas where typically a lot of women are engaged. Are
employed, yeah.
Yeah, employed.
And also in factories,
That's correct, that's correct. And many women are also in informal work in Indonesia. And there is more limited support going to the informal sector. So we do see that the women have taken a hit. But I do want to tell you one vignette, which is very important, because even though we see basically that people who are working in these particular industries have been very much affected, we have also seen that there are quite a number of women who have joined for the first time the labor force during this crisis. But it's a so-called, what we think it is, it's so-called added worker effect. That they are taking on jobs because to compensate for the overall household income, because another member of the household has lost a job. Now, of course, we hope that these jobs would be a stepping stone for women to remain in the labor force and enhance the female labor force participation. But yes, I mean, if you look at overall what has happened, yes, women have taken a big hit.
But is this a concern, do you think, especially because, I mean, one, Indonesia is a huge country, obviously, and two, we also depend on, women in order to make our economy grow. I mean, a lot of our workers, particularly migrant workers, are women, and when it comes to a lot of things, women they end up carrying the brunt, whether it's childcare and also looking after the house and everything. So, should there be particularly after this pandemic, should there be sort of a different strategy when it comes to promoting gender, or just having a much more inclusive economy going? And I know the government is very concerned about growth should come with inclusivity and equity. It's not just equality. What's the best way of doing it that would benefit everybody? I mean, if when women are educated, when women work, everybody wins, right?
Correct, yes. And in fact, there is a lot of untapped potential in women in Indonesia, because at present only half of working age women are in the labor force, compared to 82% of working age men. So there are a lot of untapped labor that could be used. And we did some analysis, and we analyzed that if Indonesia could raise female labor force participation just by 25% in the next 4 years, the GDP could increase by 3 percentage points.
3%?
3 percentage points, which is significant. So what this tells us is that sort of promoting women and enhancing women's labor force participation and economic empowerment is a very smart economic policy, because it would promote then the economic recovery and also longer-term economic prosperity. So indeed, I mean, it is important to focus on women and to promote the gender equality. And it is in fact one of the themes that we on the World Bank side have running through our program. And given that I'm now here as the first female country director for the World Bank, this is very much a topic that we also have on our agenda.
But is this something that the Indonesian government is actually, listening and also, incorporating into their policies? Are they aware? I mean, who are you talking about this? Your main partners in the government, and because, like I said, you are the first woman country director, which is, quite well. I see actually. We have, Christine Lagarde in the IMF. We had Angela Merkel. I mean, I see the women run the world's global economy. I think, we'll be on the right path. So,
correct.
Is this something that the government feels that they need to look more into?
I hope. I hope that they will look more into it. It is in the government's medium-term development plan, also to focus more on gender issues. And I do see that there are a number of people in the government who are interested. But I also understand that it's a somewhat sensitive issue in Indonesia. It shouldn't be, but it is. But we are coming and looking at it purely now from the economic point of view, given that we are an economic organization, and want to put basically the facts on the table. What is Indonesia missing by not using women to the fullest potential, and what could be done? Because we also know what are the key obstacles for women to go to the labor market and stay at the labor market. So there are a set of actions that could be taken to promote women's economic participation. And this is basically that needs to be worked on. So the equality issues will need to be addressed. So basically the infrastructure for digitalization still needs more work. And also then spreading it also to the outer islands becomes extremely important.
Also, if we talk about work, and the articles nowadays on the future of work and what work should look like, mainly as a result, not just of the pandemic itself that forces people to rethink about their workplaces and how they do their work and the professions they take, but also just the internet of all things. We're all so completely dependent now on everything internet, on the digital everything. How can we create sort of a future where all these things come together? Because here gender doesn't really matter. It's all about creativity. It's all about the ability to kind of tap into your market, or
I completely agree that gender shouldn't matter and doesn't matter, that it all depends on your skills, it all depends on your creativity and what you can do. And that's where I think that the world is to some extent moving. And the digitalization, which is now basically the pandemic has indeed emphasized its importance. And this is where the world is moving. Services are getting digitalized, businesses are getting digitalized. It's actually a great equalizer to some extent, because then if you have computer, if you are computer literate, if you know how to use it, you will get access to a very vast marketplace. Now, obviously, in Indonesia, there's still a challenge.
Yes, we still have a digital gap.
We have a digital divide, yes, you're absolutely correct. That there are people living in Java, people living in Jakarta have access, but people living in outer islands don't have. And that would need to be addressed so that the digital divide doesn't continue, but indeed the equal opportunities are provided to everybody. But that's where the world is moving, and it has been hastened as a result of the pandemic.
But is this very much now sort of the part of the strategy that the World Bank is promoting? Obviously, with digitalization and technology comes a lot of innovation and creativity when it comes to solving some of these problems, like climate issue problem, plus also the labor problem and education as well. Tell me a little bit about your ideas on what is the best way to use digital technology for addressing these very important problems.
These issues, digitalization for us, it's another one of those themes that we are trying to mainstream into everything that we do. So I don't believe in digital in itself, but what we are saying is that it's important to incorporate digital into the sectoral work. So telemedicine, I think, is the most obvious example during the pandemic. Again, expanding that throughout the whole country is very important. Having online learning is something that everybody now realizes
it's crucial.
Yeah, it's absolutely crucial.
But then it also highlights the inequality. If you don't have a good Wi-Fi or you don't have a gadget,
Absolutely, and this is basically that needs to be worked on. So the equality issues will need to be addressed. So basically the infrastructure for digitalization still needs more work. And also then spreading it also to the outer islands becomes extremely important. And then what is also needed is education. Because where the world is moving, it actually demands more and more higher skills.
This is where the competitiveness aspect comes, obviously.
This is part of it, because, for example, today, at present, 80% of firms in Indonesia say that they are unable to hire certain skills, hire managerial skills. So this is where the education system would need to adjust so that the younger generation is equipped with the skills that the future needs.
Yeah, because we also need quality
Absolutely.
work. I don't think people, especially the new generation, the millennials, they're not happy with just putting in the hours. They need the quality way of using their time and their skills. This goes back to your what the first main focus is, how to make Indonesia more competitive. I mean, do you see in the government is actually improving in this area, making Indonesia more competitive? And I know that we have now the omnibus law that is to simplify a lot of these regulations that would hopefully attract foreign investments much better. I mean, what are your thoughts on Indonesia's competitiveness? What is the first thing that needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to commend the government for what they have done in terms of liberalizing the investment space. So what was done in the area of investment in the Omnibus Law for job creation is remarkable. And frankly, it was the biggest reform Indonesia has made for decades for competitiveness, because it opened up the space for private investment, it opened up the space for foreign investment. Is it enough? Unfortunately not, because there are still areas that would need to be addressed, and in particular in trade. So there are still trade restrictions that will be hampering Indonesian exporters, importers as well, but also exporters.
Can you give an example? Is it because of the tax, or is it because of the...
Primarily non-tariff barriers. So, for example, there are pre-shipment inspections. If anybody here imports, a producer who produces good for exports is importing intermediate inputs from abroad, the shipment is inspected before it leaves the wherever it comes from. It's second time inspected here. It basically causes significant delays, significant costs, import licenses are again, because most exporters, they do need to get the raw materials, they do need to get the intermediate inputs. This is another bureaucratic process that they have to go through. And so on and so on. So there are a set of non-tariff barriers that the government would be well advised to address in order to facilitate Indonesia's competitiveness and Indonesian exports.
But I don't think this is something that's new to the government, right? Of course, I mean, investors are always complaining about, too many regulations, bureaucracy, and when it comes to competitiveness, we are one of the least competitive countries in ASEAN. Our logistics is, quite long, and it takes forever to, set up a business and so on and so forth. So, but the government is on the right track, you're saying? But further reforms need to be made still.
Yes, I'm very encouraged by what the government did in the past 6 months, or did through the Omnibus Law. And there was also other relaxation that was done during the pandemic. But there's still more to do. So basically what I'm saying is that excellent start, but let's do more, because Indonesia is still lagging behind the neighboring countries when we look at the competitiveness indicators and trade indicators.
And we're still not getting that investments yet. This is one of the key things we need to have if Indonesia needs to kind of improve its economy.
No, I have found my time in Indonesia so far absolutely fascinating. I'm fascinated by this country. You are correct, the challenges are big, but I'm one of those people who love challenges. So that's partly why I'm also here. I very much like people. So the people are wonderful. What I look forward to, I would love to see this country.
Now, one of the Paris Agreement, the NDIs, the nationally determined targets that we want, is that by 2030, the government says, with no outside help, hopefully we can reduce greenhouse gases by 29%, but with international help by 42 or 47%, I can't remember. So there's a significant increase if there is an international help. Now, I'm curious to know what, from sort of an outsider's perspective, how can Indonesia sort of capitalize this sort of carbon wealth that it has? Because, now they talk about carbon price and carbon trading and so on and so forth. How can we get more of that international kind of funding to come to Indonesia for our carbon?
Yes, no, in fact, this is where the discussion is today. It's about carbon pricing and carbon pricing instruments that the government is considering of introducing. It's not only about getting money to Indonesia.
Well,
yes,
obviously, although that's also important.
Yeah, no, that is also important, absolutely. And for example, we already have this performance-based scheme for forests in place. We have for East Kalimantan, and we are preparing another one for Jambi. And basically that if certain amount of forests are preserved, then there will be results-based payments that will be made for the government. Carbon to cap and trading schemes, the so-called emission trading schemes, many countries have introduced those around the world, and this is now under discussion also in Indonesia. And that would then provide incentives for industries and for people to start basically adapting low carbon technologies and reduce carbon emissions. Now, then the mangroves, etc. I mean, these are something, if they are linked, then also to these emission trading schemes, they could also bring, these kinds of results-based payments to Indonesia.
And we go now to your greening infrastructure, the greening of everything, basically. I mean, that Jokowi has been very much focused in building infrastructure. We have to also make sure that, it's environmentally friendly and so on and so forth. What sort of projects do you think, particularly when it comes to dealing with waste? I've seen in Scandinavian countries, obviously, where waste becomes energy and people are incentivized basically to recycle everything. Here, we still have, landfill, just people dumping things into the river and so on and so forth. Are these, what kind of projects that would generate? So you both, create environmentally friendly projects, but at the same time, you can gain from it.
Yes. And in fact, I mean, this is linking also to the marine plastics and marine pollution. Because a lot of that in Indonesia is caused by weak waste management. And where everything starts is actually first recycling. That this is, I mean, if you go to Europe, if you go to the US, you see that everybody is recycling and sorting out the trash.
It becomes a cultural thing, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's everybody views it as a responsibility. But that is not happening yet in Indonesia. I hope that we are going to get there. Then we are getting to these more advanced technologies, like the refused derived energy, where you are using the trash to generate energy. And indeed, many, in particular Northern European countries, are already using that. So that is something that Indonesia should consider moving forward. And in fact, I mean, we already have discussions on that. But at this moment, starting with recycling, starting even with basic waste management plans would be quite important.
Yep.
But I hope that Indonesia can learn also from the lessons from other countries and do some leapfrogging on some stages and adapt these new technologies.
Yeah, and we should be able to do that with technology. I mean, Absolutely. We see, I mean, it's getting cheaper all the time, but the cultural thing, I think it's important. It has to be part of our DNA because, it starts with how we deal with our own trash on an individual, on a household level. It's
correct. Everybody has to buy into that.
Yeah. Well, it's been very, very good discussion, Satu. There's still lots of things that I want to ask you, but we're running out of time. But you've been here for over a year and a half now, and this is your first, stint in Asia and this part of the world.
I have worked on Asia before,
okay.
And I lived in India before. But this is indeed the first time I'm living in Indonesia.
Yeah. So how do you feel so far, and what is it that you're looking forward to? Is this a kind of people say that it's a big country, big problems, and big challenges? What kind of whether it's not challenges or maybe different things that you're feeling about working here in Indonesia, particularly since we are one of the largest democracies in Southeast Asia, which is not an easy thing, I'm sure, to tackle in your job.
No, I have found my time in Indonesia so far absolutely fascinating. I'm fascinated by this country. You are correct, the challenges are big. But I'm one of those people who love challenges, so that's partly why I'm also here. I very much like people, so the people are wonderful. What I look forward to, I would love to see this country. So I'm reading tremendously. I'm reading hundreds of pages and all kinds of reports every week. but I would like to see it also with my own eyes.
Yes, not just virtually.
Not just virtually. So I'm waiting for the day when the pandemic is over enough so that I can go to the field, I can see the places, I can meet the people also face to face, and truly start understanding what Indonesia is all about. Now, I don't believe that I will ever fully understand it. I know I have lived in different countries, and my conclusion is that foreigners will never be able to understand, in particular, complicated country like Indonesia. But I'm very excited to be here, and I look forward to continuing my work here.
Yes, and of course, I wish you every success, and I hope that Indonesia, particularly the government, can work well with the World Bank. I mean, the World Bank's been a partner of Indonesia for a long time, and I think it's, especially in times of crisis, it's important to feel that, there is an institution that has your back.
That's it, and we greatly value our close partnership with the government, and as I said, we are here to help. We are actually here to try to improve lives of ordinary Indonesians.
Okay.
So,
well, thank you very much, Bu Satu, for this conversation. Very insightful, and once again, wish you luck and good health, of course. It's very important.
Thank you very much, Ibu Desa. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ya, demikian Insight with Desi Anwar kali ini. Jangan lupa Anda juga dapat menyaksikan acara ini di cnnindonesia.com dan juga di YouTube CNN Indonesia Insight with Desi Anwar. Sekali lagi kita masih dalam suasana pandemi, jadi jangan lupa ya memakai masker, rajin mencuci tangan dan juga menjaga jarak. Stay safe. Bye-bye.